Now we're closing in on Lent and Fat Tuesday, and in Sweden that means that we're eating Semlor. This clocks in at 592 calories. However, you can make big semlas and small semlas, and that's for a big one. So if you want to make a small one, just cut everything in half and you will end up at roughly 300. So to start off, we're gonna need 70 grams of flour and 7 grams of yeast. And we're gonna heat up 114 grams of milk, and we want that milk to be roughly 37 degrees. I think that's around 100 degrees Fahrenheit. And I should say this is for 4 semlas. I'm gonna be making this in a KitchenAid. So just crumble up the yeast, add your milk, stir that together, and once we've made that, we can put that with our paddle attachment and add our flour. So all we need to do is just mix that together, and then we can scrape some of the flour from the sides. It's not going to be a big dough since it's just four Semlor that we're making. So it's not going to be a big batch. However, we're just going to mix that together, and then we're going to leave that to rest for 15 minutes. That's our pre-dough. Then we're gonna add the rest of our dough, and we're gonna need 50 grams of flour again. We're gonna add 70 grams of flour later on. That's just the way I've been doing things, since when I made this recipe I didn't know how much flour to use, so it's just trial and error. If you want, you don't need to add the 70 grams of flour later. You can just add all of the flour now. That means that you're gonna end up with a total of 120 grams, or 50 now and 70 later. Then we're going to add 1 gram of salt and 2 grams of cardamom. Here there's only 1 gram, but I suggest doubling that because I've thought about it for a long time and it's better with more cardamom. So if you double that, I think that would be good. Then we want to measure out 40 grams of butter. We're also going to need some sugar, and that's 26 grams of sugar here. And we're also going to need some egg. We don't need a whole egg, since we're not making that many. We only need a little bit of egg and roughly 17 grams. So just mix that with a fork. Just mix that with a fork and add 17 grams to another bowl, so you only get as much egg as you need. Here I got 24 grams roughly, and that was fine, so it depends on how super accurate you want to be. Our dough has now been resting for 15 minutes, so we're gonna add our flour, our sugar, our salt, our cardamom, our butter, and our egg. And then we're just gonna mix that together. After we mix this dough is still gonna be very, very loose, and that means that we're gonna add our 70 grams of flour. And as I said, it's fine if you add all of the flour at once. It's just because I needed to find out how much flour to use, so I did it stepwise, and eventually I ended up with 70 grams. And after that, I've always just added the extra 70 grams flour at the end. So we're gonna mix that together, and the dough still looks very loose and wet, and it sort of is, but that's fine. All we need to do is scrape that dough together till we form a dough ball, and then we're gonna mix that up into 4 portions. However, we can turn our oven on, and we can turn our oven on to 175 degrees. And roughly 400 grams 392 grams. And just place that on the counter. All we need to do is just place that on the counter and roll it in our hand. And it's going to be quite sticky on top, so it's a good idea just to sprinkle some flour on top of it. Otherwise it might stick to your hand when you pick it up and put it on your baking paper. But you don't need to flour your counter or anything like that. You're actually relying on the dough sticking to the counter in order for it to form that ball shape. And then we're gonna just cover it with a towel and rest it for roughly 1.5 or 2 hours until it is doubled in size. After that we're gonna make our almond paste. And we're gonna roast those in the oven for roughly 15 minutes. And every 5 minutes we're just gonna shake those up. And we want them to turn a bit golden brown before they're done. So a little bit more. And that's it. And after that we can turn our oven up to 200 degrees, because once the buns are done roasting we're just going to put them in the oven. And we want to pour out most of our almonds, because we're going to make our almond paste with most of them, but a few of them we're going to save and just crush roughly, because it's much nicer to have those big almond chunks within your semla. And to that we're going to add 75 grams of powdered sugar. So almonds in, powdered sugar in, and here we're gonna need some egg white, but since we don't need all of the egg whites, roughly half. And all we need to do with our almond butter is just, or almond paste, is just blend that together. And as I said, we want this paste to be blended fairly well. You don't need it super smooth or anything, but fairly well blended. And then we're just gonna crush up the remainder of our almonds and pour those in. So those are the almonds I have left. Just crush those, and then we're gonna mix that all together. It looks quite wet, but that's gonna fix itself when we pour in the remaining almonds. And we can always put that in the fridge and it will firm right up. So that's our almond paste done. And that means our buns have been roasting and they're double in size as well and looking very fine. So into the oven they go. We want them in the oven for roughly somewhere 8 to 11 minutes. You want them to turn golden brown as well. We're not gonna worry about any egg wash or anything, because we're gonna pour some powdered sugar on them anyway. So it's not necessary to have an egg wash, and traditionally in Sweden you don't on your semlas. You want them to be sort of gray and boring looking. And also we're gonna just cut the lid off. Traditionally here you do a circle or a triangle. What we're going to do is we're gonna put our knife slightly towards the center, because we're gonna fill that with almond paste. And that means all we need to do now is just whisk some cream. And since I know that I had only 2 deciliters left, I didn't need to measure anything. And I whisked 2 deciliters, however I only used roughly 1. But we want to whisk that fairly hard so everything holds in place. But don't whisk it too much so you end up with butter. So be careful at the end. I think this is good. And we're going to spritz that. You can just put it on with a spoon as well, but if you want to make it look like it's from a bakery, we're gonna use a spritz bag. So just put everything in, and then you can, I think the easiest thing is just to cut the bag in half, and then you can just swirl it and everything will fold onto the center. And depending on how much you have filled your bag, you can either tie those ends together, or if the bag is very full, you can just use a clamp like I'm doing. And then all we need to do is just cut the edge off, and then we're ready to actually assemble our semla. So we're gonna fill our little hole in our semla with almond paste. And once we've done that, we're gonna put some cream on top. And you can use more cream than I think traditionally they use a little bit more. I added some eventually because I thought it looked a bit cheap. So just bun, almond paste, cream, and then we put the top back on. And the final step here is for us to sprinkle some powdered sugar on top. And that's really it. It's not difficult at all, really. It's a Swedish classic. If you haven't tried it, I hope you will. And as I said, you don't need to make them this big. You can always just do half and make smaller ones. But I think they were delicious, and if you haven't tried the Swedish semla, I hope you do. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoy.